Eliza, thank you so much. Yeah, it's my privilege to be here really today to talk to you. Okay, um, you can move there we are, and one more. There we are. Okay, thank you. What I'm going to talk about today with you is a part of what men face in health, which is how we deal with serious illness. I'll do it through four stories. And I'm pleased to offer these. They are my story and then three that follow. And those are people that I've been privileged to hear, to know. So what I'll present to you is informed very much by my experience as a HealthTree coach. All right, next. A few years ago, if you had asked me what men's health meant, I probably would have answered the way most men would. It's exercise, blood pressure, weight, cholesterol, cancer screening, mental health, and all of those are important. But then I got a serious illness, acute myeloid leukemia. And as Eliza mentioned, I went through months of chemotherapy, a bone marrow transplant from our son, uh, prolonged isolation and infections a few times, some complications, graft versus host disease, the rejection syndrome that goes along with bone marrow transplant sometimes, and then a second aggressive prostate cancer treatment recently. Twice, uh, nearly lost the war, and I became a man who couldn't safely enter a grocery store without a mask for some time. So illness completely rearranged my life and those around me. It taught me that the biggest questions in men's health are not often medical and not physical. Instead, the biggest questions are, who are we when strength leaves? What happens when competency disappears or becomes intermittent? Will we allow ourselves to receive the help offered? Can we tolerate unrelenting uncertainty? Can we remain ourselves while becoming dependent? Can we love and be loved without the usefulness and performance that we had? These are the questions we face. But perhaps most difficult for many men, can we accept a changed reality? For me, before retiring, I spent decades in corporate America and went to school at the end to train as a clinical social worker. I thought of myself as a competent, a useful, productive, articulate, and reliable guy. But all of a sudden, I had to learn how to be taken care of. For many men, that's an extraordinarily difficult shift. It certainly was for me. My incredible wife became my angel caregiver. During treatment, I spent months hospitalized away from home. So there was no one at home other than my wife. And she came to see me every day. After I was finally home as a semi-invalid for a stretch, there were also emergency admissions back to the hospital, 8 of them over time. Ambulances, infections, fear. Middle of the night drives to the hospital, one in a complete downpour driving rain. She is still my caregiver because my health wobbles unpredictably. The strain on her has been intense. Okay. Caregivers are critical, and based on experience, they come in different flavors, providing different levels of care. One fellow leukemia patient that I met in the hospital along with her husband seemed set with a very good caregiver. He seemed great. But after the first 100 days, he announced to her that he was leaving, that he couldn't take it anymore, filing for divorce. While dealing with the shock and loss of her husband, she had to immediately arrange new caregivers. She got a team of friends and family who took shifts during her recovery. It worked. She has survived and is doing great, traveling the world now. Another one of the people had a partner who was mostly there for him, but not full time, somewhat unpredictably would need a few days off every now and then to take a trip or to see and be with others. So he had to arrange alternatives as well when needed, and he did. Then there are the angels on earth, like my wife. They never falter, never fail, and they watch over us like a hawk. Our caregivers anticipate our needs. They spot emergent problems first and get help immediately. They take care of us and love us no matter who we seem to have become. Whichever kind of caregiver you have, it's important for you to orchestrate help when you need it. And if it changes, to change that along with it. To get help orchestrating if you need it, but always to have someone or some people who take care of you. The role of caregiver, I think, is really it's harder than that of being the patient. Because as patients, we receive, we're told options for treatment and recommendations, constant communications, especially in the front end with our medical team. Decisions are made, and what we have to do then is follow the treatment plan. At some point, it's just doing whatever the doctors tell us to do. That's a line I've heard many times. We are focused in that case on getting through it and on what is coming next. But caregivers have all of these same concerns about the treatment plan and what comes next. And a lot of times they're the ones asking the best questions of the medical team. They remember what was said and they take notes. They're very often, when we get home, the ones managing medications. They handle many of the detailed activities of daily living for us. Food, comfort, clean bedding, sanitation, all of that while they have to watch, unable to make their loved ones' suffering go away. For caregivers, the various real and imagined future possibilities can be terrifying. Yet, what we see is that they put on a smile and carry on. But they had narratives too. They had plans. They had social engagements, some of them regularly occurring and some future ones, and dreams of the future suddenly interrupted. They experienced great loss as well. Plus, They worry about losing us or the us that we were. All of that while still managing things and dealing with family and concerns. It's an intense, very life-changing experience for caregivers. I wondered at some point just how we could have ended up sitting across from my oncologist, who was telling us that because of the particular mutations driving my leukemia, my odds of surviving for 4 years were 20% or so. A dire prognosis. My personal and our visible almost sword of Damocles. Well, 4 years, right? Here I am at 4 years, still upright and talking to you today. Great doctors, an unbelievable caregiver, friends, family, and a critical element, fierceness, have sustained me. You have to adopt a fierce attitude toward serious illness. It requires a personal understanding of the medical, physical, social, and psychological effects it's having on your life and upon those that you care about. Remembering the people I've known who exhibited that fierceness, considering what they managed to do, has helped guide me. Also, legacy ancestors and those gone from our sight, along with inspiring family and friends, light the path ahead. Those are the people that matter most. Serious illness interdicts the identities that we men have built, who we are or were. Providers, protectors, workers, fixers, fathers, problem solvers. Identities often relying upon and closely aligned to our roles, our function, and performance in them. But sometimes our inner narratives on these take a wild turn in another direction. Dreams and plans seem to evaporate. And sometimes the old narrative that we had in our mind never fully returns. Will things ever be the same? What can I do now? Illness costs us a lot. But at the same time, illness, loss, and suffering can be instructive. Okay. Next slide. I found these lines from Aeschylus, the Greek playwright. He wrote them almost 2,500 years ago. Even in our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart. And in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom to us by the awful grace of God. I keep those lines handy for the difficult moments. So, having gone through those things, I became a trained coach and blood cancer advocate and for hospice patients as well through HealthTree, who provides excellent training and education. I've since got people to coach not just from HealthTree, but from referrals and the Duke Health system. And I've now coached many people navigating various cancers, chemo, stem cell transplants, all kinds of cancers, lung disease, almost everything you can possibly imagine. They all have questions, and a lot of times what they need from a coach is to be a good listener as they talk about their treatment openly and about the collapse of what their life was and worries about the unseen road ahead. How will it feel? What will it look like? How did I feel? How did others feel in this circumstance or something similar? From these wonderful people, I've learned something important. When serious illness hits us, people don't suddenly become someone new. Instead, they reveal their true self more clearly. Next slide. Story number 2. One of those remarkable people was Taya. He was an Ethiopian history professor, deeply intelligent, philosophical, so gentle, very religious, and a student of the ancient rock-hewn churches in Ethiopia. Taya had emigrated to the United States to create a better future for his whole family, wife and 3 children, taking advantage of the American dream. And back home in Ethiopia, he'd been a respected church elder and a university professor. He knew and taught the history of Ethiopia, including its unique role in the earliest years of the rise of Christianity, when it was known as Eritrea. About the ancient rock-hewn churches, such as the one you see here. Once they came to the U.S., he drove a taxi, and his wife worked retail so that they could put 3 remarkable children through school, then university, and to help guide them into successful professional lives, all 3. When Taya and I first spoke, he said he was choosing me as a coach because he was starting hospice soon. And my biography indicates that I have hospice experience as a volunteer at Duke Hospice. He explained why he was entering hospice, because he wasn't eligible for a stem cell transplant, which is what he needed. That's because years earlier he had developed hepatitis B and it destroyed his liver. He'd gotten a successful liver transplant, but the lifelong anti-rejection medications he had to take made a stem cell transplant especially risky, and he was denied at his home health system. His oncologist had told him that nothing more could be done, and that he had 1 to 3 months to live. He asked, would I coach him? And I said, of course. The conversation continued, and I asked whether he had sought a second opinion about this. There was silence on the phone. Then, in his beautiful Ethiopian accent, he asked me, Steve, what is a second opinion? I've never forgotten that moment. He didn't lack intelligence, quite the opposite. This reminded me just how unevenly knowledge is distributed, even among highly educated people, especially medical knowledge, and especially among men, because men are often socialized to endure rather than to inquire, to tolerate rather than investigate, to proceed rather than stop and reflect. So, Taya, his family, and I began a second opinion pilgrimage together through the American medical system. Over those months, he and I became close friends. Okay, next slide. We talked at least every other day and sometimes every day, most often while we were both walking. He near his home in a suburb of Atlanta, me near my home in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, using our cell phones. Two men in different states, walking and talking openly, vulnerably about mortality, about history, religion, books, gardens, his fabulous gardener, language, and family. Taya managed to walk 4 to 6 miles a day, even when quite ill. Me, not so far, but we talked always until we had finished our conversation. We addressed many questions, Socrates style questions, observations, experience shared from our lives, and from our love for family. Sometimes one of us posed an answer hypothetically, but it was the space between our words, the pauses, that mattered most, because meaning lurked there. We could glimpse it. Soulful moments, unforgettable moments. All the while, Taya radiated joy. Not optimism, not denial, joy. There is a difference. One day, I received a very large, very heavy package from Taya. When I opened it, it was a beautifully illustrated photographic book about Ethiopia, including pictures of the amazing churches carved into solid rock from the top downward. Scenes of locals who work so hard in the still partially agrarian country. Taya was a church elder and he was very learned in religion, and he was a scholar. The picture book shows people of Ethiopians attending church, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, in traditional white cotton wraps that symbolize the very characteristics that I associate with Taya: purity, reverence, humility, and spiritual preparation. He was such a presence. His example changed me. After I got the book, the next day I got a phone call. I thanked him for the book, and he told me, I have records of my ancestors going back over 1,000 years. Imagine that. He carried history and a legacy of many generations inside. As he worked through a series of second opinions, I supported him as his coach as best I could. He got second opinions and visited 4 major cancer centers. HealthTree was measurably helpful in getting those arranged. 2 of them, MD Anderson and Johns Hopkins, offered him a stem cell transplant despite the complexity of his case because they had experts who had done it with others. But there was a problem. Insurance. His Medicare Advantage plan classified all of those systems as out of network. One center required $250,000 paid up front. The other, a similar request. But finally, some months into this search, during which he stayed on a maintenance cycle of chemo, MedStar at Georgetown said they could do it and arrange charitable funding. The transplant could proceed free of charge. So the needed pre-transplant testing began. And then a bone marrow biopsy revealed the worst possible news: an explosive relapse. It was too late. There would be no transplant. He texted me that news that day from Georgetown. We would talk, he said, the next day. And I wondered how he would react. Angry? Would he be bitter? Would he be despairing? No. Instead, when he called me the next day, he had a singular focus: to thank me. To thank for helping him, for my friendship, for opening up, and for introducing him to my life and family. He had done the same, and we had grown so close. When I marveled at this reaction to the devastating news, he paused and said, "Steve, life is a gift." I've thought about those words many times. They were spoken by a dying man, not by a motivational speaker or a wellness influencer or someone hawking resilience solutions. Here was a man losing nearly everything, yet somehow he remained profoundly grateful for his life. Well, we stayed in touch regularly, as always. Later, even when he was in the intensive care unit, and 2 days before his death, he managed to indicate to his daughter, with whom I had contact, and who was bedside for his sunset, that he wanted to say something to me. He struggled to do so, but here's what he said. "Thank you, Steve. It was so Taya." Even as he approached and reached the very end, he never lost who he was. He was an altogether remarkable man whose presence altered my journey through life for the better. Next slide. Not every story looks like Taya's. Another man that I coached taught me something entirely different. One day when I was playing piano keyboard on the hematology transplant floor, a nurse asked whether I could speak with Harry because he was being difficult and sending us out of his room. Well, he was hospitalized and on chemo. His health had been complicated by existing COPD and what was becoming end-stage pulmonary distress. Oxygen dependent, miserable, and by all reports, very cranky. So when I knocked and entered Harry's room, prepared to show my badge and tell him who I was, as is policy, he interrupted, pointed at me suspiciously, and asked, "Who are you?" So I replied, "I'm the piano player from the hallway." His entire face changed. Harry loved old country music, and as it would happen, I was playing some that day. He welcomed me in. "Have a seat." We got into a long conversation. So Harry was a truck driver, a long haul truck driver, and he'd grown up on a family farm. He owned a Kenworth tractor and had spent decades crossing America hauling. Next slide. The word Kenworth reminded me immediately of the old song, you may remember, some of you, Convoy. And I had to ask him, had he ever hauled logs? "Yeah," he said, "did that a few times. Prayed nobody stopped short in front of me." Interstates, truck stops, country music, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Merle Haggard. Every week when I came to the floor to play, we then talked about his times on the road, the open road, about the truck stops and the friends that he had at each. Since Harry grew up in farm country, I shared funny stories from my youth when I worked on farms through middle school and high school and beyond, really. We easily bonded and became friends. The nurses reported to me that he looked forward so much to the music when I came, and that he was now letting them come into his room to do the things they were supposed to do. One day, Harry said, "They told me my numbers are bad. It's not working." That was the longest comment that Harry ever made to me about his medical status. Even while he got weaker, oxygen dependent, having a lot of trouble getting enough air to breathe, and to my trained eye, clearly approaching his end, Harry remained fundamentally oriented toward freedom, toward movement, toward highways, toward the western sky. Next slide. He talked about his many trips on I-80 and I-90 and about Montana, his favorite state. He talked about Montana the way some people describe heaven. Skies higher there, he told me, and I knew exactly what he meant. Our conversations almost never centered on illness. Instead, on his stories of the open road. And he painted such vivid scenes that we were transported mentally into the cab of his truck, where I rode shotgun, while he narrated the mountain grades that he was traversing, talked about diesel engines, about shifting gears, about impossible climbs, and most of all, about the freedom of the open road. His body was failing, but he, Harry, had not disappeared. That matters. Well, one afternoon I came to the floor and Harry wasn't in his hospital room, but his name was still in the little slot next to the room. After playing piano keyboard, I left and I got downstairs and was walking the long hallway toward another hallway that would eventually lead me to the parking garage. I'd taken off my glasses. I heard a familiar voice calling, "Steve, Steve, it's me, Harry." Coming toward me, a distance away, was Harry, two nurses alongside who pushed his wheelchair and navigated his IV pole on its wheels alongside. All three of them were smiling broadly as we approached each other. "I'm glad to see you, Harry," I said. "I missed you upstairs." He grinned at me like a mischievous teenager. One of the nurses confided, "We've been outside for a smoke break." "Brought my unfiltered camels," Harry added. That was the moment that I knew comfort had become the priority for Harry. Hospice had been engaged. Now, anything he wanted, a smoke, a drink, whatever, if it was legal, they would arrange it for him. We chatted for a few minutes and said we would talk again next week when I came to play the piano. As I left and proceeded down the long hallways, I reflected on the scene that I had just witnessed and what did it mean? His battle was ending. His sunset was visible. A few days later, it turned out Harry was transferred to the ICU, the intensive care unit. So when I got to the floor, his room was empty. Now, nurses cannot comment on the medical state of any patient because of HIPAA and confidentiality. But I asked anyway, and a nurse I knew said that he had been moved. Moved is a different verb in the hospital lingo than transferred, which would mean different hospital. So I figured he was somewhere, probably in the hospital. And I knew that he was a man with end-stage COPD. He was likely in the ICU. I spoke to his sister by phone that evening, and he had indeed gone into the intensive care unit. I could no longer visit with Harry. He passed about a week and a half later, as reported to me by his sister. Well, I knew that yes, he had passed, but that he was on the road again. Before we move on to story number 4, I want to pass along a coping mechanism I learned about. Maybe we don't need it now, but this one is worth saving and tucking away for later if you do need it. At a certain point, we can find ourselves no longer able to drive safely, temporarily or permanently. But here's the thing. We can always drive a shopping cart that has hand grips. As we age, the little things that we tolerate become less tolerable, such as a crowded grocery or a big box store aisle. We find an aisle that has our item impassable because heedless shoppers have parallel parked their carts at an angle and no one can get by. Next slide. That is when the breach maneuver can help. Here's what you do. You get an annoyed, slightly angry, and a little bit crazy look on your face. You begin an accelerating roll, both hands gripping the cart handle, leaning forward and accelerating until you reach ramming speed. People blocking the aisle, well, you think they aren't looking, but they are. And once they get a view of the developing onslaught, they'll clear the way. Clear it, not like they heard an announcement, clean up in aisle 2. No, more like, attention shoppers in aisle 2, madman on the loose, make way, clear out. But this is important. When you reach your shelf and get the item you want, you got to keep your game face on. Stay mute and move on, lest you ruin the breach maneuver for when you need it next, because a reputation helps. Next slide. There is another kind of courage entirely, not about dying, not, at least in the beginning, dramatic illness, but long obedience inside limitations. And this is true for many different serious illnesses. Carlos looked at his beautiful wife over coffee one morning and expressed a concern. And this is Carlos's story. Lately, I don't seem to be able to walk as far as I usually can. And when I play golf, I can't hold my driver the way I used to. I'd always put it in my hand as if in a cradle behind my back and hold it with 2 fingers. But I can't do that anymore because of a slight tremor in my hand. His wife replied, I've noticed the tremor, but my dad had what they call essential tremor. And they told him it was normal as some people age. Maybe you just need more rest. Well, that's another thing, said Carlos. I'm needing more rest. I can walk and play golf, but it seems harder. You need to make an appointment with your doctor. Well, I have my annual physical day after tomorrow. And 2 days later, when he came back from his physical, he had a very solemn look, and his wife asked, what did he say? He took me through a bunch of tests. He had me walk, hold my arms out. He thinks I'm stiff. He had me write so that he could see my handwriting, and he said my handwriting is very small and that it could be Parkinson's. They were quiet. Carlos broke the uneasy silence. The doctor told me that I needed to see a neurologist. He had me wait, call the neurologist while I was there. I have an appointment next week. A week later, Carlos came back from the neurologist and a subsequent MRI with the diagnosis, Parkinson's. He told his wife, the neurologist prescribed levodopa, a standard medication, to see if it helps. And then Carlos began a long journey with Parkinson's that has progressed over the 10 years since and which is now life-limiting. He has to take medicines to be able to walk and to talk. I try not to let it stop me, he told me, and he doesn't. It's a battle to which he's applied the conscientiousness of a successful lawyer and the work ethic of the son of Cuban immigrants who came to the United States with nothing but the clothes that they wore. Carlos is, for those who know him, unstoppable. 7 years after the Parkinson's diagnosis, Carlos had a number of things going for him. He started and still participates in Rock Steady Boxing, a program designed specifically for Parkinson's patients. It helps them to cope with the natural muscle wasting and stiffness that comes with the disease. But he said, what's more important about it is we have great camaraderie and we have gelled as an important source of help for each other. There's always someone there who has had the same feelings, the same challenges, and we're able to help new members cope. We understand, we listen, and we support each other. With this disease, we don't get better, we get worse. People don't know how to deal with that. Some friends and colleagues drift away. And there are other losses, loss in the quality of relationships and social circles, in our ability to communicate, and from our diminished availability. Having a group of people with Parkinson's that we see 3 times a week who are on the same journey is priceless. Next slide. In the same time frame, 7 years into the 10 years since, Carlos began feeling a new symptom. He and his wife were at the beach one day when a new general weakness that he was feeling seemed worse, and his heart rate was very, very fast. They called the doctor. They came home and saw a cardiologist that day. They thought it might be AFib, Carlos told me, but tests said it was atrial flutter. So I had a cardioversion to shock my heart into normal rhythm, and that helped. But they sent me to the heart catheterization lab where they found a couple of significant blockages, bad enough that they couldn't do stents, so I had open heart surgery. He had developed also lasting heart muscle weakness. His measured heart output was remarkably low. Cardiologist expressed surprise that he was still mobile and doing a lot of things. Since then, Carlos told me, my heart has better output, but still below the normal range, so I'm diagnosed with heart failure. But I stay active, boxing 3 times a week, cycling 3 times a week. Sundays are for church and family. I try not to let these things stop me, Carlos reiterated. And he hasn't. We saw Carlos and his wife and other friends recently at an outdoor amphitheater concert of the symphony. We had a conversation between us all the while, occasionally getting a shh from people around. He happily told me that they had taken a Viking cruise to the Danube and had an incredible Italy tour with a Boston church group where his son is a parishioner and has a great job up there and sings with the choir. They toured many notable churches in Italy, and the choir performed eventually at all and at the Vatican. It was an unbelievable experience, he said. I can send you a video they made of it. Please do, I responded. Has your health been stable? I asked. I've had a couple of ER visits and medicine changes. They installed a fancier pacemaker to keep my heart beating in the range of 70 to 72 beats per minute. Works great. This remarkably resilient man, passionately dedicated to living his life, said, "We're going to make another trip to Boston. I want to see the Kennebunkport, the Bush compound up closer," and they built a park there. Carlos has reasons to live, reasons to fight, to box, to cycle, to travel and socialize. And we're planning another Viking trip next year down the Danube. I don't know what shape I'll be in, but I am not stopping. I am entirely confident that he won't be stopping. Next slide. In conclusion, these stories left me with a lot of thoughts. And after consorting with the wise old owl, I came to the realization that men's health is not merely about extending life or fixing problems. It's also about preparing to accept reality. We encounter experiences that we never imagined would happen. How does it feel? Well, a good friend said it this way. We feel like our course is uncertain. We aren't sure where we're going, and that's hard. Sometimes we remember the way we were, but those are only memories. After these life changes caused by serious illness, what remains? Sometimes fear, anger, but Taya taught me that every day has joy. Harry taught me that each man's road toward meaning is different. And Carlos shows us that when we are knocked down, we have to get back up. Sometimes what remains is beautiful if we have enough presence to see it. In our time today, we've talked about identities being fractured, self-redefinition, the critical importance of caregivers, how we handle and perceive pain, and about reverence for life, about companionship, about freedom, about how it's imperative to get up and fight when we are knocked down, to be fierce, about gaining wisdom, and about the healing power of companionship. Through these magnificent people and many others, from loved ones, angels, and the legacy of inspiring people who are gone from our sight, from mentors and educators with organizations like HealthTree and NBMT Link, I have learned that loss cannot and does not define us. None of us has lost ourselves. Next slide. Instead, we gain a wonderful truth that if we learn and grow in wisdom, even if we grow smaller, our true selves remain, and perhaps we are left with a measure of grace. As my friend said, life is a gift. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Steve. I'm just
My pleasure.
going to share the rest of our slides for a little housekeeping items, and then we can get on our way. So we just thank you for starting out Men's Health Week so strong with those wonderful stories of such empowering men. And we're hoping to have some more of those stories throughout the rest of the week. On Wednesday, we have a community gather event for leukemia where we can all speak together with Alan Katz as we do a spotlight on strength adjustment and life beyond diagnosis with him. And then on Thursday, June 18th, we have a fertility and hope beyond treatment webinar with William Yank. It's more an adult, young adult conversation. And then we have our next Leukemia Community Gather event in June 26th, and I hope to see all of you there. And the gathers are not recorded, so I hope that you all come and be live with us so that we can have that community that Steve was talking about, having that opportunity to speak together. If you're not into virtual, we do have in-person opportunities with the Connect to Cures events. This month, we are going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you would like to participate, we have the QR code here. And we are also revamping our website, like I mentioned before. So if there are any bugs, please send us an email or click on the new bug button that we have so that we can make sure that the information that you need can get to you as quickly as possible. And then a special thanks to our AbbVie and Amgen sponsors. And then thank you again for coming here today. I know that I learned a lot and I feel very edified from what Steve has shared today, and I hope that you all do as well. My email is on the screen, so if you have any thoughts or any suggestions for future webinars, or just if you want to chat, feel free to send me an email. I appreciate each of you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We couldn't do this without you, and I hope to see you again at another event.